Hello, and welcome to Wine with Weeda, the podcast that is dedicated to engaging with health professionals and caregivers in meaningful discussions. I'm your host, Rita Shamoon, or as my clients call me, Weeda. I'm a pediatric speech pathologist, and I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we deep dive into connecting you with caregivers and healthcare professionals, sharing their insights, stories, and key takeaways to help you with your child's diagnosis and your journey. Whether you are a parent, healthcare professional, a lifetime learner, or simply a wine enthusiast, you're in the right place. So let's sit back and relax and enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to Wine with Weeda. We continue to celebrate carers this month with a collaboration with ENVISAGE. Today, I'm joined by Penny Graham, a social worker with over 20 years of experience, a parent of 4 young adults, and a facilitator with ENVISAGE. Penny's son, Al, has complex disabilities, and she's become an incredible advocate for inclusion, particularly in mainstream schooling, and in systems that aren't always designed to support children with disabilities. In our conversation, Penny shares her journey navigating education choices, advocating for her child, and building supportive networks, including the friendships that helped her through the early diagnosis days. She also offers practical tips for other parents on championing their child's needs. Without a doubt, it will be a thoughtful and inspiring discussion about advocacy, community, and finding your voice as a parent. Now, buckle up, get your wine ready, and let's start this conversation with Penny Graham. Penny, welcome to Wine with Rita.
Hi, Rita. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here.
Now, Penny, can you please tell the listeners about yourself, your family, and then we'll dig deep into your role as an ENVISAGE facilitator.
I'd love to do that, Rita. Well, I am a social worker, as you said, but as you know, primarily I also think of myself as a parent to young adults and also my son Al. Um, and I guess for me, being a parent and a carer is a really important part of my life. And I think I've sort of grown into it in a way. One of the things I didn't realize was that I was a carer in the beginning when my son Al was very little. But, I'm very passionate about sharing stories, and that's something that's important to me. But my role as a carer and also as a ENVISAGE facilitator, as you mentioned, is also very important to me. So I guess for me, it is about connecting with others and just doing the best I can in life.
That's wonderful to hear. Can you please tell the listeners about your son Al and the difficulties and disability that he has?
Absolutely. So my son Al, who's now 24, was it was a normal pregnancy, and I didn't know of anything until he was about 6 months old when he started to miss his milestones. He has 3 older sisters, so I have 4 children altogether. And this little boy that was so precious to me, um, he was diagnosed with what at the time was cerebral palsy, so complex physical disabilities. So Al is a wheelchair user, but it wasn't until probably about 8 years ago we learnt that he had a very rare condition called GNAO1. And so we were able to connect with that condition and learn a little bit more. But generally speaking, Al is a young man with physical disabilities. He's nonverbal, but that doesn't mean he doesn't communicate. He communicates a lot, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through this. But yeah, so he's an amazing young man, and like all our children, as carers, we think of them as little warriors. And I think
Mm.
it's really important as a parent to, get to know our kids. And that was something in the beginning when I got the diagnosis. I sort of sat there and I said to my mum, I'm not really sure if I can go down this road of disability. And my mum, who is an old physio, said to me, Pen, he's the same little boy that smiled at you yesterday and he's still smiling today. So don't let disability define him. And so I guess those wise words at the time were really important to me. And then I also laughed because she turned to me and then said, do you need a Valium tonight? Which said, no, I don't think I do. But so, we know that this journey has bumps and, there's a lot of emotion involved with it. But those precious moments when our children smile at us or some little milestone is achieved or just anything little, they are so precious and they're
Oh,
great
that's so
highs. And
beautiful. That's gorgeous to hear. Not long ago, a mother said to me, I had to unlearn what I learnt about what communication is. Now, to her, communication was about using words and phrases and so forth verbally. But because her child's non speaking, she had to see the way her child was communicating to her. And once she had that switch, their ability to communicate to each other blossomed because she understood his way and then was able to get his needs and wants met through his nonverbal gestures and pointing, which then was able to reduce his frustration and as well as her frustration too, but let him see, allowed her to see him as the child that smiled at her the day before, like was your mother told you.
absolutely, Rita, and it's so true. And one of the things that we do talk a little bit about in this wonderful Envisage is signs and signals and cues. And many
Mm,
of them are nonverbal. And I think of my son, how he has communicated. And he was in the choir at his primary school, and he's sitting up there on the stage, and then he pulls at his collar and makes a face going, oh my God, I'm in the choir and I'm nonverbal. So, I think having a sense of humor and picking ourselves up sometimes when things are tough, but also knowing that even, if it's nonverbal, whatever, our kids are communicating in different ways.
mm,
So that's been something that is, really important to me. And I think that when you have a child with a physical disability, often people don't wait for them to make a sound or look. And in our case, it's through the eyes. So for Al, a lot of what he's telling us is through his eyes. And I
mm,
remember one situation when he was in intensive care in Children's Hospital, and he was looking at me like, don't leave me. I'm not comfortable with this nurse. And it was really very powerful. And so, and also signing to go to the toilet.
mm.
I tell one story that is in intensive care where he's trying to tell the staff that he needs to go to the toilet. And it was in the middle of the night. And for some reason, I came upstairs from the parents' hostel into ICU, and they looked at me and they said, oh, your son was trying to communicate to us something we didn't know. So we knocked him out. And so when
Oh,
he's around, but this is what they do in ICU. They are used to accident victims. And so from that time, after that, we learnt how important it was. We had a sign above his bed, which was some of the signs that Al will make. And we spoke to the staff about neurological patients are different. Our kids with
mm,
disabilities are different. And so communication is not just verbal, and how we can help others to learn about our kids. And I think that's one of the most powerful things I've learned as a carer and as a mum is learning and hearing other stories from other families and
mm,
then seeing what you can take from that. Someone said to me right in the beginning of my son having a disability was have the courage to listen to the advice of others. It doesn't mean you'll take it, but you might find a gem. And sometimes someone outside your sphere or your circle might see a better way to do something. And that's what we do now with any new staff. We call them PAs that come to support
mm.
our. If you see a better way of doing something, tell us because it might just be an absolute gem.
You've just shared some really beautiful stories there and powerful ones that without a doubt will support the listeners here on Wine with Weta. I want to go back to what happened to Al in ICU, that moment of communication breakdown. They found it challenging to interpret his behavior. So assuming his initial point of communication was through an eye gaze. Then that was dismissed, which then led to some escalated behavior. And in that moment, they interpret it as, oh, there's a challenge here. Let's stop this and we'll knock him out, as you said. But imagine if they actually understood how empowering that would have been for Al and also for the medical staff there to recognize the importance of patiently observing, understanding, and communicating with caregivers who know their child best.
It's so important, Rita, and I think in this case he was signing the toilet sign. So
Okay.
he'd had surgery, so
Yeah.
he was, had a nasal gastric tube, and he was there sitting, lying in a bed, and he was saying, "I need you to bring the wee tube to me." And that
Mm,
was his dignity because he, needed to go to the toilet. So again, the communication was so important. And one of the things I've learned is that not everyone has all the answers, and people aren't out to be difficult or give you a hard time, but it is important for us as carers to recognize our unique position we're in and how we know our child best. And so
mm,
for us then it was about calling a meeting and having an education opportunity to say to the staff, this is our kid and this is what he's trying to communicate, and there will be others in there. And we know that children, with autism and others, they're going to have, they're going to be quite uncomfortable in a hospital environment. And so knowing the most you can and communicating with staff is so important. And I always have a picture of a healthy little boy above his bed when he was in hospital. I thought, we don't want to see you seeing him sick, but here he is with his sisters having fun. This is the kid that you are looking after in hospital. And
mm.
so when we have school meetings or any of those things, as a parent, I always think the best thing, we put a big picture on in the middle of the table if Al isn't there for the meeting, and this is who we're talking about. Let's think about it. Let's see
Yeah,
him there riding his bike or with his sisters or whatever it might be. So let's bring the person into the room if they can't be there and they don't have a voice, because the most important thing for our kids and as carers is to make sure our loved one has a voice in whatever's happening.
absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, Penny, this has been an amazing start to our conversation. I'm looking forward to the rest of it. Um, how has your professional background as a social worker shaped your approach as a parent and an advocate?
It's a big question, Rita. I think as social workers, we learn about systems theory and family
Mm,
units and how many, I guess, variables can come into life and understanding a family's needs, and also the choices that families must make that are right for them. And as you mentioned, in my case, Al went through a mainstream school, but I'm a strong
mm,
advocate in families knowing what is right for them. And as carers, we have to make a lot of choices. And so as a social worker, we're always listening to what the family needs, giving them the voice, understanding what's important in that family, culturally, whatever it might be. And so I think as a social worker, that's helped me understand that and also take the time. We don't have all the answers. And the
mm,
experts, and also I think that collaboration, being a team. And I think as a social worker, I was always part of an allied health team. I've worked in community health. I've worked with a group called Family Advocacy, and understanding that, it's important that we listen. And I think maybe social workers taught me that. We don't
yeah.
have all the answers.
100%. And my own daughter has a disability called hypotonia. And it's so interesting, the speech pathologist I was before her diagnosis and to the speech pathologist that I am now, it has shaped me to listen, to not answer, but to listen, to comprehend, because the parent is going through the same waves of emotions that I had when my daughter was diagnosed. And it has changed my relationship with patients in a way that I don't feel every clinician can have, because it's that personal lived experience and relatability too.
Absolutely, Rita. I think lived experience will bring some new things, and we don't have all the answers. But I think we
Mm,
need to value, and more people are doing that. And one of the things I've done as a carer is get on a hospital volunteer committee that is a consumer committee where we share lived experience. And
mm,
just recently, they're building a new hospital in Sydney, and they asked the consumers to talk. And one of the things, there was no undercover shelter between the hospital and the car park. The architects and the project people had not even thought of that. And so if you get your wheelchair wet or you get wet, just something like that. And so they said, we're so glad to have the lived experience. So I think as
mm,
a carer, remembering to value yourself if you can. And that's so important. And as a professional too, we don't have all the answers. And I'm sure as a speech therapist now, what you bring to the table for families will be just so unique and so important.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, Now, you mentioned mainstream schooling for Al. Now, as a speechy, I know the system that a child with complex needs, mainstream schooling is incredibly challenging for many families to access because the child's needs are high, also the impact on the other students and the teaching staff and the way the classrooms are accessible. And as a result, parents feel the need to go to, say, a special unit or even homeschool. I'm so intrigued. Let's talk about how your journey with OWL and mainstream schooling and what did that look like for you?
Well, very early on, I didn't know what the word inclusion was. And all I did know was that I wanted him to have as many experiences as his siblings and also his peer group. And I really didn't know what that shape would be. But when we started him in preschool, 26 of the class were going to the local primary school. And by that point, I had attended a couple of workshops on kids starting school. But I
Mhm.
think what I wanted to do was to give him the opportunities and to not be a gatekeeper and change that. For us with a physical disability, it was an 18-month lead in. It meant ramps, it meant talking to them, it meant having a support worker. And I think very often of my neighbour who had a little boy the same age with autism, and we're both getting our kids to the front gate. And in my neighbour's case, this little boy didn't want to put the school uniform on, and it took 6 months for him to do that. In my son's case, he needed a special toilet seat, he needed
Mm.
equipment, so that was the guys for us. But in terms of making that choice that was right for our family, I was guided by let's give this a go. And I think
Mm.
what's really important is to collaborate, whether you make a choice to go to a support unit, to homeschool. I guess it's that community and that support network you try to build around you gradually. In the beginning, you're very isolated. You've had your pediatrician appointment, you've heard the diagnosis, you're sort of going to them to hear what to do. But gradually, I realized that, I'm beginning to know what my son needs. And in our case,
Mm.
it was to give Al this experience, even though he was in a wheelchair, he was nonverbal. I just had this feeling I wanted him to be with peer group and we wanted to see how that would go. We, yeah, go ahead.
Did you work? Because I'm just quite intrigued with this, especially with the systems that are in place. Is this a remote school, like a rural community, or is this just a normal residential
So
in the
this is,
local suburbs?
yeah, this is in the local suburbs, and I went and looked at a
Okay.
number of our schools. And, the transition into primary school from preschool is one hop. The other one is when
Yeah,
you transition from primary school into high school. And even
correct.
at that point, I had a lot of people saying, oh, you'd be better off in the support unit, go to do that, you should do that. And I went and had a look at our local support unit, at the special school, and then at the high school. And, in my case, when I went to look at the support unit, the person taking me round pointed and said, oh, well, there's the Down syndrome room. Well, that cut it out for me immediately. So, and I sort of thought, and then I said, oh, and do the kids in the support unit go to the canteen? Because one of the things, Rita, that's so important about the school experience is what we call soft curriculum, swimming carnival, the dance, um, the Easter hat parade, all of these things are
Yeah.
the most, and going to the canteen. And at the support unit, they said, oh, well, we have a wheelchair window, but no, we bring the lunches to the kids in the classroom. So that again, some alarm bells were ringing that didn't fit what my values were for Al at that time.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that for all children and all families, this is going to be a different decision, and deciding what is right for you is really got to be what's right for your family.
Mm.
So, but for us with Al, and I do laugh, it took Al till fourth grade to tell me non-verbally he wanted a lunch order. And when I finally worked it out, he'd seen the lunch basket coming, first grade kindy, and all of those things. So, again, this idea that, what was right, he wanted to be part, and I could see that he did. And I tell the story of when he was got his first walker, he loved to kick a ball. And I knew that he did. And I went to the RSL, they were enrolling for soccer. And I stood outside that RSL with a photo of my son. And I rang my brother, who had a son the same age, playing soccer. And I said, am I brave enough to go along, Graham, and enroll Alec? And he said, oh, yes, do it. So I went in and they said, oh, we'll enroll him. I was thinking he might be the drink boy. I didn't know. They said, oh, he can play. So as a result of that, he played soccer for 4 years in his walker. I had two girls that were doing their Duke of Edinburgh that helped push the walker on the oval. And then a local ballet school wanted to enrol a child with Down syndrome, and they said in the paper, Alex Graham's playing soccer. Why can't this little girl belong to this ballet school she was 5 years old. So I learned very early that by taking a leap of faith and being creative, that there is a flow on effect for others. And if
Mm,
that changes people's perspective of what is possible, it doesn't mean they do everything the same as their peers, but maybe they do an element of that. And
yeah.
so Al played soccer. He learnt that you're off the field sometimes. He learnt that you lose. He learnt that you have to be a team member and you go to training. And as a result, he was very fit. And he went through 4 different walkers. He played between the ages of 7 and 12. And then in the end, the whole Socceroos wanted to play with this little team from Hornsby in Sydney. And it just became something that was bigger than me, but it also brought a lot of joy to the children that were not kids with disabilities. So everybody learnt. And I remember, Rita, that 1 in 3 of us will become a carer in a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so those children might have a sibling, they might have a grandparent. So caring is a really broad spectrum of things. So I guess, yeah, I realized very early on perhaps just taking a leap of faith and asking, but having an idea of what might work in your head.
Mm. This is so powerful. Like the opportunities you provided for Al just by simply, let's just give it a go. It's the answer wasn't no, he has a disability, he cannot. You've reframed it to show, well, he can. Let's see how he can participate. And I feel like this is such an important message for any extracurricular organizations, soccer, dancing, schooling. Yes, there are limitations, without a doubt, we know that. But we don't know the capacity in which a child can thrive in this environment. So why not give it a go? And I would love more organizations, including the Department of Education, to really have that mindset because the stress and agony that families go through when they simply want what exactly you experience, Penny, has pretty much been dismissed. And if we can just encourage that, I wonder what the world would look like.
Absolutely, Rita. And I think it
Mm.
is about collaboration. How can we make this work? But one of my messages always to other parents is don't forget to say thank you. And I think of Alex in the high school, and we've made a documentary about his inclusion through high school. And in one of the scenes, they show him in the raft. The PE master at the beginning of the school year said, the head of PE said, how are we going to make it work with sport in high school? Because he's in a wheelchair and we do soccer, we do hockey, we do all these things. By the end of that year, Alex was playing every single sport. The
Wow.
peer group had worked out a way for Al to be in those things. When the swimming carnival came along, there was another PE master who was a wonderful guy from Tonga. He had 4 kids. He had no experience of disability. He said, Al, you're going to be in a canoe for the 15 years age race. So every year, that swimming carnival, they'd run Al's age race with all the mates. They'd all be there. They'd run the 15 years age race, but Al would be in a canoe and they'd just run the race. All those little kids in year 7 would see what this school did. They made that extra effort to make sure that this fitted Al's needs and fitted the idea of let's give it a go. One of the
Mm.
things I did when I wasn't at the swimming carnival, because I didn't always go to everything, I was busy working, I got sent the video. I wrote to the department, the local department in our area. Within 10 minutes, every teacher in that high school got a thank you from the Department of Education. And so my
Oh,
message always is when they do things well, when people or organisations do things well, take a moment to send an email, to say thank you, to acknowledge someone who gives something a shot, because it really opens doors and it actually makes people feel good. And
Mm.
it is, you never know when you're going to come back to those people as well. So I think that's another message I would give as a carer. You know, if people do something well for you or have an idea and it really works, acknowledge that.
Yeah. I'm curious, has the school allowed other children with complex needs to be enrolled with mainstream given our experience?
Absolutely. And
Wow.
I did hear at one, I was at a function speaking about same opportunities, same classrooms, and a parent said, I'm moving my child to this school. But that did ring alarm bells because, you know, it is about the relationship you build with the organisation, with the school, and how you do it. We don't, if you go in there with your boots on and, you know, you don't want to be aggressive, it's not about that. It's how do we make this work? How can we give this experience to everybody? Give it a, you know, everybody learns from this. And I remember in home economics in year seven, Al would have the list of the recipe and the kids would bring the equipment and he would point to what was happening. But I guess also kids have different needs, and if you're in a support unit, those needs are different. But it doesn't stop you having creative opportunities if you can think of them. Think of a way. I often think of it as don't take Muhammad to the mountain, bring the mountain to Muhammad. So we would hear about having boys' nights in from fifth grade. We had boys' nights in, pizza and PlayStation. Al would ask a few mates. His mother would be nowhere to be seen. We'd get a cool young guy, about 14 or 16. They'd order the pizzas and they'd sit in the TV room. And the other kids would say, oh, when's Al having his pizza night in or his PlayStation night? Another one was a young girl with an intellectual disability, and the older sister had makeup nights. And they would all come and they'd do nails and things like that. So I think it is about, and I think about another story I heard, and this was really powerful. It was a family that were in America, and the father was a professor at Harvard. The mother was too, and all the siblings had gone to Harvard. And this younger one with an intellectual disability kept saying, I'm going to Harvard. And the family said, well, how are we going to go there? How's that going to work? How's that going to work? In the end, she got a job in the library. She got
At
her
Harvard.
and she went to Harvard. And so, you know, I have another young lady that I'm very fond of who has a fashion design business in rural New South Wales. She sews the scrubs for the vet, supported to do that. And last year she sponsored the Ladies Golf Day. And this young lady is 26 with Down syndrome. So, what we
Wow.
have to do is think about the possibilities and the passions of our children. And Envisage is very good about that. Focus about thinking what is strengths based? What do kids love to do? And thinking about
I
that. And
love
I
that
love
because in speech therapy, we talk about following your child's interests, following their lead, and that will then create connection, which will then create communication. And what you beautifully said with Envisage, it's about finding your child's purpose, what lights them up. And just because they have a disability, it does not dismiss their ability to do. Yeah. And as you're talking, Penny, I'm really curious. What is Al now as a 20, is it 24 you said? As a
20.
24-year-old. Is he participating in the community, doing some work? Like, I'm really interested. What's Al like now as an adult?
Well, look, Al has done some advocacy. He's spoken with me, presented at Department of Education. He launched his own online business, although he did tell me last year he wanted to take a break from that. Jackpot
Mm.
Gifts. So that's all on hold. But he has supported to launch an online business, a gift buying business. And so he, yeah, and you know, he's very much in terms of sharing his story. So we often do things together. It took me 4 years, Rita. I never imagined my son would move out. He moved out at 22, not into a
Really?
group home, not into a group home. He's moved into his own two-bedroom rental unit with support. So he has signed his own lease. He has a stamp which has his name on it. So he, yeah, he lives on his own with support in the unit. Whenever he has hospital admissions, he has his own stamp and he's peg fed, Al. So when the peg is changed, the surgeon, the gastroenterologist said, "Look at me, Al. You're happy about going ahead with his surgery. So everything, all his paperwork is signed with his own stamp. So we have empowered the staff to understand, to give Al that opportunity to be supported to do the decisions that are right for him. So it's an
Wow.
ongoing process. We have
This
bumps,
is remarkable.
so, but we look to find the ways that empower him. So, and I have to laugh. Al's three older sisters, the siblings, when he went to have his 21st, they said, "Oh no, you can't have it at the RSL. It's got to be down by the beaches. It's got to be, some cool place." But another story I think about too is with young kids about they're often having to be passive. And so when Al was younger, he supported kindy kids to learn to read. He would go and listen to them read, even though he's nonverbal. So he would do that as voluntary work. He also, in year 9, his very close friend from Nepal, there was an earthquake and his friend was in Nepal and the friend was safe. But we said to Al, well, you really need to do something to support that, that cause. And so we supported Al to set up a GoFundMe page. He raised $1,800 for the earthquake appeal. So they're looking for ways that our kids can be contributors. They might walk a dog for a neighbour, or check in on a neighbour, or take a meal, or just, looking within your community. In the old days, we look in our local paper, but often there are things where our kids can get involved and have a valued role. And that's something we also talk about, socially valued roles. They might be the table setter in the family, or the one that calls people to dinner, or puts the bin out. So every time we give kids a role, they have a responsibility, and that empowers them to be the little person they are. They may, one family I remember had a little person that was not very well, but they loved to listen to the bird sounds. And so that was a unique thing they did as a family. They went outside in the morning and they listened to the bird sounds together. So creating roles is important.
And I feel giving a child a purpose and function to participate has an unmeasurable impact on their mental health too, which we also need to recognize for our young children and young adults. I want to know more about yourself. You you support Al in so many ways, but without a doubt, Penny, you would have needed that emotional support too to support you along your journey. What role did friendships have for you to keep you going and to keep giving you the strength to show up?
Well, friendships are so important, and as you
Mm.
say, Rita, being a carer, mental health is, really, really important. I remember, my girlfriends, when I said to my mum at the time of the diagnosis, I said, I don't know if I can go down this disability path, mum. And she said, when your friends know, they will, they'll support you. And, often there are those that come back into our circle or those you least expect. Others drift
Mm.
away, and there are some gems that walk with you, and my girlfriends have been a very powerful part of that. I did go to a carers retreat at one point very early on, and I'm still meeting with those mothers every sort of couple of months. We get together for lunch. Our kids have different levels of disability, but we're still, that walking with others that have a journey that might be a little bit similar is really powerful. But I think of my daughter when she was 16. One of my daughters, she said, "Mum, you have to stop being a victim. I've enrolled you in yoga." So I'm still doing yoga. That's quite a long time ago. She's much older now. But that idea that we must not be victims and we must value ourselves, and we talk about self-care and envisage and how just what are the barriers, and even if they're very small, but it is a really important part. And I'll put my hand up. I've had the counselling with the through the GPs, 10 sessions, and checking in. I do continue to check in with my counsellor. Very, very important, Rita. And I think, I remember going to one of Patria King's carers workshops and thinking, how can she help me? I've got a child with really complex needs. It's 24/7. I'm working so hard. But one of the things I took away from that was when you take that cup of tea into the garden, and you live in the moment for that 5 or 10 minutes and just think about that cup of tea or coffee and just enjoy that, listen to the birds, look at the garden or whatever, wherever you are, take that moment. And that stayed with me. One of the things I love to do is write poetry and writing, and that's even if it's 5 or 10 minutes in the corner of the room, just trying to make those moments. But then everything can derail. Don't think that for a minute that
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not dropping my bundle, because I am, and that you get up
you're
some days.
human. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, but as you say, friends and those that can work with you. And we've started a circle of support for Al, and that's been particularly important with transitions, moving out of home. I never imagined that my son would move out of
Mm,
home. So, mm.
amazing. You really highlighted the importance of community and building that village to keep yourself and Al persevering. Is this how you came across Envisage and how you became a facilitator? Let's talk about that now.
Well, Envisage is such a great fit, I think, for
Mm,
me, for many, many families. I came across it through my previous work place. I had heard about it. I'd been delivering some webinars, and I was so excited to hear about it because it really covers so much of what I love and what I feel is so important for families. And as I mentioned before, it's these little stories and others' experience that really buoy us on our way, because
mm,
one child with a disability, you've met one child. No child with autism is the same, no child with cerebral palsy or any other condition. They are unique, they are just, such precious little beings. And so, Envisage, when I heard about it, I was really excited to be part of it. And I'm really committed to doing it, and I hope to continue to do it. It's just something I really love doing and delivering.
Penny, anyone listening to this podcast without any hesitation will be feeling very optimistic and hopeful that there are many opportunities that their child hasn't experienced yet. And it's about instilling that hope that, yes, your child has difficulties, but you don't know what the future upholds for your child if you haven't given them the chance to actually thrive in those moments. So thank you for your vulnerability here today. This month on Wine with Weta, we are celebrating carers in collaboration with Envisage. Let's talk about carers. What message would you like to share to any parent or carers on this month of Wine with Weta?
Well, firstly, you're not alone, but you need to be brave enough to reach out. And I know that there are fabulous resources across Australia, the Carer Gateway and others like that, that you can reach out to. But I think this idea that we need to look after ourselves, and if people offer to do something for you, have a little list. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I was the lady with the casserole. I was the mum going around with the
Mm,
casserole. And I realized pretty quickly, we're running corporations almost as carers. We've got a lot of balls in the air. And so, taking one of those moments and thinking about what is right for you. And one of the greatest things is, people often mean well and say, oh, I wanted to take Penny on a hike. And I knew I'd have a migraine at the end of that. What was right for me was to actually have just time on my own, walk on the
mm,
beach. They're the things that, really helped me. So I guess know yourself, try and make networks, try and be brave to reach out to others and to other professional services that might help you along the way. And it's find your community. And it
mm.
isn't always easy, but it might just be one or two other people that you can ring or chat to. So I guess you're not alone, and we are doing incredible jobs. I didn't
Mm.
realize till Al was 8 that I actually was a carer. I thought I was a mum, but the role was a bit bigger than that. So yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for that, Penny. Now, looking back on your journey, what's one piece of wisdom you'd give to parents just starting on their child's diagnosis journey?
It's tough, and we don't want to paint a picture that it isn't tough. But I guess I think get to know your child, get to know what brings them joy, understand when they're frightened or anxious, And I guess just take on the services that are there. You know, I guess if you have someone that can walk with you, that's important. One of the messages I've always said is take a girlfriend with you to appointments, even to the
Mm.
paediatrician, GP. And I always suggest something called a silent note taker, someone who takes the notes, because it's enough just to be in the appointment. You're not going to remember everything everyone says.
Yeah.
And just understand that you will come through and you will find your stride. You'll find a little bit of a tribe. You'll love your child. You will continue to love them. And the moments that are precious are so great. They are so wonderful. And the highs are huge. There are downers and days when you sort of think, oh God, can I? But also for families without kids with disabilities. I've got 3 other children. We've
Mm,
been
getting
held
used
back and
into
doing other things. But look for the resources that are out there. And, I think siblings are a very important part of that as well. But allow others to help you and reach out if you possibly can.
Penny, I have loved this conversation. You have shared beautiful insight into self advocacy, giving opportunities that sometimes are not even spoken about, but also giving Al the autonomy to be who he's meant to be in this world of a world where they're told they cannot. And you have beautifully demonstrated that despite his challenges, he is able to be a successful participant in society in the best way that he knows he can. Now, this has nothing to do with Envisage, but I would like to extend an invitation for both yourself, Penny, and Al to come on Wine with Weta to share his story. And we can talk about this later, but I would love to speak with Al and to get his perspective, obviously, with you as his mother, because we need to hear his story. His story has value. His story needs to be celebrated and shared because in a world where we don't hear enough of it, we need to sparkle this sunshine to show there are opportunities out there. You just have to give it a go.
That's a lovely description of sparkling with all our kids, Rita, and that's a lovely invitation. Thank you. And I guess I'm so thrilled that you're doing these podcasts because I think hearing the voices of others and other carers and families and how they're going is so important. So thank you for having me.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. For anyone who'd love to reach out to Envisage program, I will leave the details in the show notes. This whole month, we've been talking about carers and Envisage and the wonders that Envisage do for families. The beautiful thing, it's easily accessible, it's for free, and it's a community, a tribe where your own concerns are valued. You're being seen and heard. And even if you're not getting that within your own circle that you currently have, don't be afraid of being vulnerable with families that share the same lived experience because you just don't know what gem, as Penny said, what gem you will come across that will give you a different perspective or a different light to something that you might be concerned about. So, yes, please go look at the show notes on this podcast link for you to access Envisage. Now, Penny, before I finish up, I ask all my guests if you were to be a better version of yourself today, what word would you tell yourself?
Oh, Rita, that's a hopeful. I think always hopeful. Hopeful.
Hopeful.
Yeah,
Hopeful.
yeah,
You
yeah.
have definitely shared. Being hopeful can lead you to many surprises that were unpredictable too. Love that. Hopeful, special word. Now, for everyone else, I hope you have a hopeful day filled with unpredictable expectations that will brighten your day. And another episode of Wine with Weta will be brought to your ears next week. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Wine with Weta. I hope you found some new inspiration, learnt something new, or gained a fresh perspective. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you please leave a 5-star review, as it really helps the show get in the ears of new listeners, plus it takes 5 seconds. If you're keen for more strategies and insights, then head over to Instagram and follow RS Speech Pathology.